Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the persecution report. Let's take a few seconds for the people to join. Suppose how was your party yesterday
Oh,
with
party
your
was good.
friends?
Yesterday we had a very good, we went to an Egyptian restaurant, and it was for the first time that I tasted their cuisine, and it was really good. Thank you.
And Miss Chaudhary is busy about Pohela Boishak. It looks like that in the UK, still Pohela Boishak party is going on.
Now, Pahla Boishak party goes in the UK, especially in London, for an extended time, because I think the main Pahla Boishak festival will take place in June or July or something like that, isn't it? If I'm not wrong, in
I
East
think
London.
I think I saw a poster about an event in June. We have a couple coming up in May. So yeah, it does go on for a couple of months at least.
Yeah.
It does appear that some of the audiences are joining in. So, everyone, good evening. Once again, welcome to the Persecution Report. This is your host, Anwar Shadat Jihan. Today, we are going to talk about a multifaceted crisis that Bangladesh is currently experiencing and an incapable government who is not only accepting that there is a crisis, but they're failing catastrophically. Bangladesh is currently being kept in the dark. So before we begin, at the very beginning, I would like to play two small clips to give our viewers an understanding about what we're going to talk about. Because as we know, the current Prime Minister, whenever he opens his mouth, Mr. Tariq Rahman, whenever he opens his mouth, historical leaders like Maulana Bhashani time travels and provide something to his father, or he gives birth to some other kind of controversy. And there is this guy, a minister, who is acting like the de facto prime minister or the spokesperson of this government. So let's take a listen to what he had to say at the parliament. Since Bangladesh Awami League does not have the political right to talk at the parliament, I think this is our platform where we can talk. So let's take a listen to what he had to say at the parliament.
জ্বালানির কারণে কি মাননীয় স্পিকার বোরো চাষ ব্যাহত হয়েছে? কোনো মিল ইন্ডাস্ট্রি বন্ধ হয়েছে কিনা যদি সংকট হয়? কোনো কলকারখানা, চাষাবাদ, বোরো চাষ, স্কুল কলেজ, ব্যবসা বাণিজ্য সবকিছুই স্বাভাবিক চলছে, তাহলে সংকটটা কোথায়? জাতীয়
So he is the current Home Minister, His Excellency Mr. Salahuddin. He was asking at the parliament whether the rice cultivation was being hampered due to this crisis, whether any industries were shut, or whether the crisis affected any universities. Now let's take a listen to another clip.
বাড়ি কোথায় আপনার? কয় লিটার তেল দরকার আপনার প্রতিদিন? এখন তেল পাচ্ছেন না? বাড়ি কোথায় আপনার?
So, my dear listeners, as you have seen, there is a government minister who is asking where is the crisis, and we are seeing a farmer from the North Bengal of Bangladesh crying because he does not have enough fuel to run the irrigation pump. His all his crops are being destroyed. This is where Bangladesh is currently at, completely in the dark because the government is not even accepting there is a crisis. Bangladesh Awami League, the last government, built an energy infrastructure capable of producing 25 to 30,000 megawatt of electricity, and now there is a gap of 3,000 megawatt. In the rural areas, there is 12, 14 hours of load shedding, and we have even heard surprising statement like there is experimental load shedding. I have never heard in my entire life about experimental load shedding. When I was growing up, when I was young, the BNP government was in power, there was no electricity. Every 2 hours, there was no electricity, and then electricity would come. It appears that Bangladesh is going back to the dark era of 2001. Farmers watching their irrigation pumps go silent at the moment when the crops need the most of water. And the government inherited a very, very well established infrastructure of energy. And within only 2 months, they are completely dismantling it. To discuss all this critical issue, today I am honored to be joined by Dr. Rahan Jamil, my co-host. He is a member of the Center for Bangladesh Genocide Research, and Jasmine Chaudhry, a public representative from the United Kingdom and a passionate social justice campaigner, and Barrister Taposh Kanti Bal, a fervent promoter of Pro 71 values who worked tirelessly in his legal career. First, we will start with Dr. Jamil and his presentation about the fuel crisis and its true cost for the ordinary Bangladeshis. Dr. Jamil.
Okay, let me load my presentation. I want to welcome everyone who's listening in, tuning in now, or will be listening in later on. Assalamu alaikum. My presentation will focus mostly on screen. It will be hopefully self-explanatory. I'll not be doing much of the talking. Can you see my screen, Jihan?
Yes, Dr. Jamil.
Okay. Good. So let us begin. Today, I want to talk about Bangladesh's energy crisis. Give me one moment. Thank you for being patient, guys. So today I want to talk about Bangladesh's energy crisis, not as an abstraction, as a documented series of choices. This crisis has been done to Bangladesh, not as a natural disaster. There was no earthquake, no flood that destroyed Bangladesh's power sector. This is the result.
Dr. Jamil, there is, for some reason, the presentation went off. You could take a look.
What happened, Jihan?
The presentation is not showing up.
It's not showing up? Okay, let me try one more time. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the crisis was done to Bangladesh. It wasn't a natural disaster or an act of God. It was a sequence of choices. Right? So we're going to look the entire presentation in terms of 3 chapters. Chapter 1 will briefly talk about the BNP Jamaat era of the early 2000s. What happened was during that 5 years of Jamaat BNP era, 0 megawatt power was added. There's a huge shortfall in terms of gas production, the installation capacity, and load shedding was a permanent feature of daily life. At that point, our current Prime Minister, Tariq Rahman, was known as Khamba Tariq. Khamba, for those, our international audience who doesn't know, basically means electric pole. Because of the massive corruption Mr. Tariq Rahman did, installing poles without giving any electricity. He ran a shadow government under the house, which was called Hawa Bhavan, that controlled everything. right? In 2006, there was a huge farmers uprising. They protested this lack of energy, power, diesel, and this darkness, and those farmers were shot and killed. The second chapter is the rule of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Many term it as the miracle because of the possibilities that she gave us hope. When she took over, Awami League took over power in 2009, this was the capacity that she inherited from the previous government. She chose to build. And in the next few years during her rule, this is the growth of our power capacity in the last 15 years. It is a five-fold increase, a massive, massive growth. And Bangladesh reached a huge milestone in March 2022, where we got 100% household was covered with electricity. They had access to electricity for the first time in Bangladesh's history under Sheikh Hasina's government. So what was built is a quick snapshot you see on the screen. This is what the Awami League government under Sheikh Hasina built in those 15 or so years. It's really amazing for a developing country like us. So it was not a foolproof thing. We had vulnerabilities during that time as well because of the domestic gas need, and LNG imports began. But wisely, she made a long-term pact with Qatar and Oman so that we can secure good deals with LNG. The last chapter we're going to talk about is what happened, the dismantling of what she left after the 2024 terrorist movement. What she left was this, right? A quick snapshot on the screen. There was a 6 billion clean energy pipeline, most important of all. So in September 2024, just 30 days of Jamaat Yunus regime, they canceled 31 clean energy projects, ladies and gentlemen. That $6 billion of clean energy was gone. The 820 million per year was not saved. And of course, over 3,000 megawatt power was erased. And worst of all, there was no replacement plan. No replacement plan. So what the Jamaat Yunus government gave Bangladesh during that time, about 2 years, is this. We had a 4,000 megawatt average daily power shortfall during those few months. 42% of Chattogram EPZ lost 30% of production, and of course 1.2 million agricultural jobs was at risk. We had imported power from India, but the government refused to pay them the 850 million in arrears. As a result, the northern grid of Bangladesh had 11 weeks of rolling blackout. So what happened? The crisis hit the farms and the farmers first. The diesel prices increased by almost 50%. Irrigation costs increased by over 60%. And the yield of our crops and production fell by almost 20%. What this means is that every one of us can agree that rice is synonymous with Bangladesh or vice versa. So it took a direct hit on that of our production. Expenses and cascading to everything else with higher prices. So what that Jamaat Yunus government tried to do was they said, okay, we're going to build 34 wells, but they ended up drilling only 8. And there was no offshore bidders for that. Domestic gas was hitting high, important LNG was also hitting a higher price. In this scenario, the government made some kind of a pact with then US Ambassador Peter Hass's Accelerate Energy. If you look at the timeline on the screen, it's alarming. Look at this. From August, when Yunus took over power, then September, then what happened is all on your screen. It's crazy. I'm not going to read through them, but this is a direct implication of what the Yunus regime did behind the scenes with ignoring the long-term pact that the previous government made with Qatar and Oman. $8.5 billion deal was given to Accelerate Energy of then Ambassador Peter Hass at an extreme, as an increased price, which is higher than other companies. As you know, Dr. Yunus pledged 3 zeros: poverty, unemployment, and carbon emissions. However, this is the practicality and reality of what he has delivered. So the Jammu Yunus government made these choices, and this is what they did in a summary snapshot. I'm going to give you a quick tour of the newspaper headlines now. Just take a look what the newspapers are saying and doing about this. So this is the overall summary of what is happening now in Bangladesh. It's not a statistic, ladies and gentlemen. This is the story of our daily life. Look at the number of hours some cities are losing power every day. And to wrap up, we can say that Bangladesh did not run out of electricity. Electricity was turned off for us. The legal and political questions will be what the panel will be talking about. The facts are on the record. If anyone needs more information, please let me know. Jihan, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jamil. What you have showed us is extremely important. It does talk about what the Awami League government built during its tenure. But at the end, you have shown us the news headlines. Those headlines seem to not go into the eyes of the current Home Minister. He has the audacity to ask, where is the crisis? Now let's start our show. And first, I would like to go to Ms. Chaudhuri about what the BNP government has been doing for the last 17 years. They have been criticizing the Awami League government's various deals in terms of electricity. Whereas in reality, the Awami League government built 100%, has made Bangladesh 100% electricity sufficient, right? So, Ms. Jasmine, lay out the actual architecture of what the Awami League government actually built and what the numbers say about the claims that the BNP government had been historically making against the Awami League. To you.
Thank you. Let me attempt to be very, answer this question with some precision, because what you are hearing, and we continue to hear from BNP, is characterization or framing of this kind of this narrative that relies heavily on imprecision, and it's certainly not talked in details about their claims. So it simply blurs all the details of many of the contractual arrangements that Awami League government had put in place, and the infrastructure that Dr. Jamil just outlined so comprehensively just now. So some of, to start off with, some of the arrangements that BNP government are often using in their narrative, in their claims, they're saying these are conventional loan, which has left us in a huge amount of debt. So just as a first point, it's important to clarify these, contractual arrangement they're referring to was actually a capacity purchase agreement. And it's really important to clarify that from the outset, I think. And often we hear of critics sort of saying how expensive those contractual arrangements were, and how these agreements are costing us. But with this critique, it's really important to put things into the context, and at the time, when these agreements were put in place, Bangladesh's grid was under sustained strain. So the realistic alternatives were, continued load shedding or a rapid expansion of domestic peaker plants reliant on imported LNG, purchased at a volatile on the spot market prices. So if you look at it from a sort of labelized cost basis, this agreement was not out of line with those options. In certain scenarios, it was more stable and a predictable choice, which the Awami League government made. These agreements were not in isolate. These were not isolated commitments. The Awami League government invested heavily in the enabling infrastructure, including sort of the HVDC interconnection, the associated transmission system, specifically to integrate the supply and reduce exposure to high cost spot LNG imports. So what the BNP government inherited, therefore, was not an abstract debt trap, but a functioning contractual obligation, along with approximately 850 million in accumulated arrears, as we've heard, over the UNIS and Jamaat, and a significant portion of this accumulated arrears stemmed from that 4-month disruption in payment processing during the political transition and the sort of the terrorist attack we saw in July 2024. So rather than trying to stabilize the situation, stabilize the current crisis, the BNP government seemed to be obsessed to choose or to use this frame and to label these contracts or arrangements as predatory, suspending the payments further and allowing tensions to escalate to this level, which is causing a serious crisis in Bangladesh, instead of pursuing a structured renegotiation. And the consequences were, these are immediate consequences. Supply has curtailed, the northern grid is destabilized, and manageable contractual issues are evolving into a systemic energy crisis. So the broader economic cost, which we also have to take into consideration, include sort of loss to the industrial output, emergency power procurement, the inflationary sort of pressures linked to disruption in irrigation, and almost certainly all this exceed what it would have cost to honor the agreements and to renegotiate in good faith from the outset. In attempting to avoid a liability, the government basically is, they're not eliminating it, they are amplifying the impact. In a nutshell, they have saved nothing and are destroying some of the great work that the Awami League government and the great efforts that were put in place throughout Sheikh Hasina's government.
So when the BNP government is busy about throwing blames at others, when the Prime Minister of Bangladesh is busy playing with model cars, our farmers are crying, our farmers are struggling, and the government needs to pay heed. Now let me switch our focus and let me turn back to Barrister Ball. Barrister Taposh Kanti Ball. The BNP government has been criticizing about corruption of Awami League in this sector and in that sector, and to include even in the energy sector. But how does that claim hold when we are seeing what the BNP government is doing right now, how they are mismanaging the energy portfolio? Is there a legal name for it, or is there a legal mechanism there to hold them accountable? To you, Barrister.
Thank you. There may not be any name for this particular situation, except simply saying that this is the most dishonest kind of way to to just to hide the truth. In Bangla, we always the time say that মাছ ঢাকতে শাক ভাজার একটা কথা আছে. So that saying that they are creating this debate or this narrating this corruption story over and over again, so that people do not ask them questions about why, whenever you are in power, why there is no energy, why there is no oil, there is crisis in the electricity sector. So how do you actually run this country? Because look, when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina came to power in 2008, the first thing she committed, apart from establishment of International Crimes Tribunal, is that Bangladesh will be an energy efficient country. Why it will be an energy efficient country? Because you see, there are so many things that is connected with energy. It is not only about industrialists, but because Bangladesh wanted to be a food sufficient country, right? For that, you cannot only give seeds, you cannot only give fertilizer to the farmers, need to give them uh, water as well. And there is groundwater in Bangladesh, especially in this time when we are coming out of winter, and in the after the spring, in the summer, there is this main corp, we call it main corp. That is because I mean, if you follow the weather pattern of Bangladesh, just after this the it will be rainy season, and most of the places in Bangladesh will be inundated, and there will be no more crops. I mean, even though right now, thanks again to Awami League, because if you see, if you remember that after 1996, when they came into power, then the rice scientists, they discovered this iri, this is special kind of seed which can be grown even in water. So apart from that, what I wanted to say is that that is the first target of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, so that people can water their paddy fields. This is the time, if you don't water your paddy fields, those plants will die, those crops will die because of immense heat, right? So that's why the video clip you have shown us, that a farmer is crying, is saying repeatedly that my crops are dying. That is the reason. Electricity is not only required for that. After they sow the seeds, and then when they will harvest, then there are now machines. The farmers, actually, during this 15-year period of Sheikh Hasina, they have forgotten how to harvest by hand, because everything was automatic. Because in that way, because of this revolution in agro based technology, which is again for running which you need electricity, people can produce more. The other day in the parliament, the minister for food, he was saying that we have enough rice in our shallows. Why there is enough rice? Because Hasina made this revolution not only through agro technology, but ensuring the farmers, who are the backbone of the country, they get electricity. Look, Hasina did everything to ensure that we are energy sufficient, because not only the farmers wanted to have a good harvest, they also wanted their kids to study at night. So if you remember, in my day, like when I went to visit my native village, I remember that everybody is bound to go to sleep by 8 o'clock at night, because there is no electricity. You have your dinner, and just after that, to save the oil, you have to put the lamp off and go to bed. Then you wake up in the morning, that's a different story. But after energy sufficiency, people started to have a nightlife, and also people started to study, which is reflected that right now SSC exam is going on, and lots of these students are complaining that they cannot study. First of all, there is no light, there is no fan, there is no AC. Even in the exam hall, there is no electricity. So it is not only the farmers, the students are getting directly affected because of this situation. Now, now coming back to investment situation, because of this electricity, local investment increased in many folds. If you compare, not only foreign direct investments came, but also local people started to do business because Hasina had a business friendly environment, right? Lots of people with a small tool started to earn. If you visit the old Dhaka, you will find hardly any house where there is no factory, right? Because people with small tools, they can produce like sandals, shoes, many things are getting produced over there. So not only that, like, if between you and me, if you see that because Hasina's government gave us energy sufficiency, we had EPZ, we had Bangladesh high-tech parks. So because of that, so many things are coming. It was the dream of Hasina that there will be technologically sound students who will work in this high-tech park and these EPZs. How she managed to see this dream? Because she was energy sufficient. But now look what happened in this term. After the main wonder of electricity is probably metro rail. I can challenge you that when you were young, you never dreamed that there will be metro rail in Dhaka. I can challenge you. But that was possible by Hasina. And why? Because we were energy sufficient. We had energy, we were paying those bills. We are not having money from any other country to pay those bills. It was our own money through which we had Padma Bridge, we had uh, metro rail, and we had all the paddy fields full of harvests, right? So now, coming to the present situation, not only because of this mob culture that the foreign direct investment and the local investment has dried out, but also because of mismanagement, you could not pay the price to these electricity suppliers, right? So, since they failed to pay these electricity suppliers, there is no electricity at this time. And why this was not done? Because of your failure to micromanage the whole situation. And you employed inexperienced people in those positions. Not only inexperienced people, you put corrupt people. You said that this is my meticulous design. You said that I have a plan. You can have a lot of plan. You can have a lot of meticulous design. But if you don't have the ability for good governance, micromanagement, then everything will fail. And Bangladesh has become a classical case of how a developing country can fall into the trap of debt and lawlessness, and a country where there is no electricity. Thank you.
Thank you, best of all. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina did all that through her magic because she is the daughter of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who thinks about the Bangladeshi people 24/7. Her life is about making the lives of Bangladeshis better. Now, with that, I would like to come back to Ms. Jasmine because the BNP government is trying to throw the blame at the geopolitical crisis, geopolitical hit that we are seeing, namely the US-Iran war, right? But the geopolitical crisis does not affect Bangladesh only. It affects India. It affects other regional peers. So, Ms. Choudhury, what are you seeing? Like how the other regional peers are managing this crisis and what this current Bangladeshi government is failing in comparison to the regional peers?
Thank you. I think the critical difference, as you just outlined, the critical difference between Sheikh Hasina and whether we have Yunus and Jamaat coalition or whether we have BNP and Jamaat in opposition or in coalition, the critical difference we have seen over and over again throughout Bangladesh's history is a leader whose vision, whose passion, and every seconds of her time is committed to making the lives of the ordinary Bangladeshis better. And that is the critical difference I think we're seeing. So, you could come up with all different narratives, you could come up with all the blames on the previous regime, but even if you put, when you look at the sort of regional context, Bangladesh's current trajectory becomes clearer and less defensible when you compare it to our kind of neighbors, if you like. So if you consider India, for example, over roughly the same period of time, it confronted a significant power sector debt burden, with state distribution companies owing sort of generation firms more than 1.7 trillion rupees. Yet the response was structured rather than rhetorics, rather than the rhetorical politics that we're seeing from BNP, through the sort of revamped distribution sector scheme, the RDSS, liabilities were acknowledged in India systematically. They were kind of systematically reworked, combining sort of federal fiscal support with enforceable efficiency target and improved metering. The outcome has been measurable. By 2025, India's peak power deficit had fallen to below 0.5% of demand, reflecting a system that, while still imperfect, is moving towards stability, not a crisis. A similar contrast you will be able to see in Vietnam, one of Bangladesh's closest competitors in export manufacturing. During the years in which Bangladesh allowed key energy arrangements to lapse, Vietnam has accelerated investment in solar generation and secured domestic LNG capacity. The result is an industrial power system with reliability in the top percentile among comparable economies. That reliability is not just an abstract metric. It is directly influencing global supply chain, with manufacturers increasingly shifting orders from Dhaka to Ho Chi Minh. So even in Nepal, we're seeing operating with far fewer economic resources, offers a revealing sort of counterexample. In 2024, it successfully recognized cross-border power import agreements with India through sustained diplomatic engagement and detailed technical planning, achieving a reported 12% reduction in import tariffs. The underscores what is possible when negotiation replaces confrontation and disputes. And against this backdrop, Bangladesh's position is just difficult to justify. The HVDC converter station, a critical piece of cross-border infrastructure, remains underutilized amid the ongoing dispute we're seeing with some of the contractual arrangements. The physical assets exist. What is lacking is a coherent policy framework to deploy them effectively. And what makes this situation particularly frustrating is that it was not structurally inevitable. The previous government's investments, whatever the controversies you may want to raise here, they left behind a substantive energy infrastructure base with disciplined management and credible engagement with creditors. That foundation could have been strengthened. Instead, it has been politicized and in the process undercut. So who ends up paying the price for this failure? It's the people who can least afford to do so. And I just want to add the result is just not a political failure. It's a lived one, felt most acutely by households, farmers, as you've shown in the video clip, the businesses whom power sort of, outages no longer it's not an occasional disruption. This is what they're experiencing on a daily basis. And BNP have just simply chosen to weaponize this politically. And as I said, the people are the ones that are paying the most heftiest price for this failures.
Ms. Jasmine, what you have said is that the ordinary people of Bangladesh are the ultimate victims of this mismanagement of the BNP government. Now, I would like to turn back to Barrister Ball with this mismanagement. Barrister Ball, when a government uses their inability, their mismanagement as a political strategy, and that strategy produces measurable harm to the ordinary people, to the citizens, what accountability mechanisms are there to prevent that mismanagement, and what accountability mechanism should theoretically engage to protect the ordinary people?
First of all, the mechanism we have is, we have anti-corruption bureau, because the anti-corruption definition is quite wide in Bangladesh. It doesn't only mean monetary transaction. It also means, for example, it could be nepotism. It could be willful negligence to perform your duty. There are that's just a wide definition of misconduct in government service. So even if you fail to perform your duty, so the anti-corruption bureau can term it as a misconduct, and they can investigate into it. If because of your mismanagement there is violation of human rights, for example, then National Human Rights Commission is there, right? And definitely, if in the procurement places you have, if there are irregularities in procurement, there again there is a procurement body, public procurement authority, who hears about these irregularities. Any whistleblower can inform them about these irregularities in procurement. If you remember that, especially in the procurement sector, uh, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina first introduced e-tendering system. Now, what is e-tendering system? Previously, there was fight between gangs with who will submit the tender physically. So Hasina said, no more fights. You submit it online, right? And she has provided a ceiling under which you have to, like above which you have to submit everything through this e-tender. So these are the things that is in place through which you can check and balance the activities of administration and executive. There is another body which is known as Competition Commission. So if there is any oligarch system, you can definitely go to this court. There is a tribunal inside this competition commission. So you can directly go there and file your complaint and bring any oligarch for trying to, of service. Apart from that, if you think that the government is not providing you information, for example, as a citizen, you have the right to ask what, how, when, why, right? So if you don't find these answers, there is Information Commission. So under Section 6 of the Right to Information Act, you can file an application before this Information Commission and ask for information. For example, I remember that a class 8 student who failed in the final exam, and that's why she was not promoted in class 9. So she filled up this form under Section 6 and asked the commission that I want to see the papers of my final exam. Because you remember that in the final exam in Bangladesh, they don't show you the exam papers, right? So she said, I want to see it. So that through that commission, finally, she could see the paper, and then it was proved that there was miscalculation on the part of the teacher, on the basis of which she failed. The girl passed. So there is a lot of avenues that are created by Sheikh Hasina. For example, if there is mismanagement in, for, say, internet, say in the local market, there is adulterated food. So now there is Bhokta Udhikar, right? Consumers court, where you can go and file petition. This is unheard of in Bangladesh before Hasina introduced it. So I can give you a number of examples to show that what.
Yeah, it appears that there are plenty of avenues that the citizens can take to hold the government accountable. But for that, the government first needs to accept that there is a crisis. But it appears that
Thank you for reminding that, because I actually took note about it, that uh, this is one of the, I would say, quality of Sheikh Hasina, that during this last 15 years, she always the time admitted if there is a crisis. And she addressed those issues publicly. For example, Corona. She said at the final days of 2019, she alerted all the people, especially those who were coming from abroad. You remember that how Corona spread in Bangladesh because a group of people coming from Italy, they did not wanted to follow the quarantine rules. So they broke the camp. They went into the inside the country, and that's how it spread. And after that, for the first time, you remember Dr. Flora, right? She was coming every day in front of the media and telling the whole country that what is the situation, how many people died, and how many medicines we have, and what kind of help that can be provided in the hospitals, and what people need to do. So it was not Prime Minister Hasina who came in front of the media and saying it every day. No, it was Dr. Flora. As a public health specialist, she was dictating all the norms. And that's how we got out of the Corona crisis. After Corona crisis, just before Russia and Ukraine situation, Hasina again said that there is another crisis coming up. Probably Russia might attack Ukraine, and we will have a problem in, in certain crops, because we import a number of crops through that channel. So she, because
Barrister Ball,
sorry, yes.
I'm sorry to intervene, but whatever you're saying, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and Bangladesh Awami League government are the living proof that if the government is capable, if the leader is capable and willing, even an international crisis, the crisis of a century, COVID, can be handled properly, and the
Right.
citizens can.
Not only that, but where I was coming to is that Hasina openly said in 2023 that in 2025 and 26 there will be a crisis, because this was told by people, because the way the international commerce is going on, that there is, the economists could foresee that there will be a crisis. And since Bangladesh invested in so many mega projects, so she also foresaw that Bangladesh could also be in a crisis. And look, the moment she said that not only Bangladesh, the region will be in crisis, we have seen that Sri Lanka was in crisis. At the same time, Pakistan was in crisis, and number of other countries were also in crisis. But Bangladesh was not in crisis because she admitted, and she, I mean, I would say that she could prepare the whole administration in that way. She knew, because it's a dominoes effect. This whole governance system is a dominoes effect. If one domino fell, the other dominoes are bound to fall. That is why you
The top leader must be responsible. The top leader has to have
yes, that's
extreme
why
ownership.
this, you see this measles crisis, right? Because Yunus failed to provide this tika to the kids, and that's why now we are having this measles crisis.
The prime minister is busy playing with model cars when
Yeah.
children are dying, Now, with that,
I
the
mean,
human cost,
that
I
is,
would like to now quickly come back.
I'll just add just this, that the moment the government admits that this is the crisis, on that moment, the whole governing system, including the administration, gets into a red alert mode, right? And if you deny that we are in a crisis, for example, how many crises? Health crisis, electricity crisis, food crisis, and then this law and order situation crisis, and terrorists are planning to attack Bangladesh. All of these are happening because you are in denial. That's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, best of all. Now, we have talked about the human cost. So now I would like to quickly come back to Dr. Raihan Jamil, who has been sitting very quietly there. Dr. Jamil, you have worked with real data, real ground reality. Now, data does not always capture the reality. When you look at the ground reality of Bangladesh today, what does the data not capture? How the people are suffering? If you can give us a snapshot about the ground reality of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Jihan. I think this is a wonderful question to answer. What the data does not capture is the silence. The silence of the generator going off at 3 o'clock in the morning in a rural clinic. The silence of a refrigerator that can no longer keep our vaccines cold. The silence of a child who stopped going to school because after dark he or she cannot study because there is no electricity in his or her home. These silences are not in the GDP figure. They are not in any export data, but they are real and they are accumulated. I want to say something directly about the Awami League here. I know we have talked in great length, Barrister Ball did, then Ms. Jasmine, Ms. Chaudhry did. The vision and foresight of our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is legendary, right? Nothing short of that. But no one is claiming that the power sector that we had, as you saw early in my presentation, was speckless. Right? There was no fault in it. Of course, it had issues in it. Maybe there were procurement controversies, or maybe there were financial decisions that needed more scrutiny. I understand. We all agree with all of that. But what she built for our country is a system where you switch on and power comes on. We have light. That has never happened for all of us at the same time in Bangladesh's history. Where a child in Kulaura or Maulibajar could study under the electric light for the first time in her life, in her family's memory, is a unique example for us, is our practical reality. Where a child in Feni or Borguna could run and a clinic could run an oxygen concentrator throughout the night without power disruptions, that is something. That is everything to the people who deserves it. And to kind of summarize what I just said, I know we're kind of running out of time. What you have just said, Jihan, is about accountability. The first step in addressing an issue is to acknowledge that there is an issue, that there is a problem. And sadly, neither the Jamaat Yunus government or the Jamaat BNP government is doing that. That needs to be done. Back to you, Jihan.
Thank you, Dr. Jamil. At the very end, we are approaching, and I would like to come back to Ms. Jasmine very quickly and very briefly to talk about what leverage the people of Bangladesh today have to hold this government accountable. How can the people in Bangladesh and how can the Bangladeshis abroad hold this government accountable so that we can come out of this crisis? Because there will be crisis, it is inevitable, but it has to be managed. How can the people help and what the people need to do?
Thank you. Well, first of all, the assumption or the claim that ordinary citizens in Bangladesh and the diaspora communities lack the leverage is not an accurate one. Let's just accept that at the outset. The leverages do exist. What has been missing in the last 2 years is the coordinated and the strategic use of those leverages. So first, there are multilateral accountability channels that remain underutilized. Institutions such as the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank are deeply embedded in Bangladesh's energy sector through loan and technical assistance. These are not unconditional relationships. Both institutions require adherence to good governance standards and ongoing reporting on energy access, poverty metrics, for example. So mechanisms like the World Bank Inspection Panel and the ADB Accountability Mechanism exist precisely to evaluate claims that development outcomes are being undermined by policy failures. So when civil society groups and the diaspora organizations submit well-documented evidence, records, particularly of policy-induced energy deprivation, they do more than just protest. They create a formal, internationally recognized record of evidence that cannot be easily dismissed or denied. And that's really important for us to sort of gather those evidence. Secondly, I'd like to mention briefly is the trade leverage. So particularly through the European Union's preferential access framework, Bangladesh's participation in those GSP is subject to ongoing review, including compliance with labor governance and the sort of border socioeconomic conditions. So there are, international communities are concerned because we've heard about our Prime Minister's track record on corruption previously. So there are questions being asked by international communities about this sort of good governance and how we would have the sort of anti-corruption approach that BNP and Jamaat had promised previously. And third, and perhaps mostly underestimated, the economic and the political weight of the diaspora itself. So the annual remittance flows on $22 billion. These are not merely financial transfers, they are structural pillar of a national economy. So beyond that kind of monetary dimension lies this something more powerful. So organized voice, diaspora communities in countries such as the United Kingdom, the United States, the Gulf states, have the capacity to engage host governments, shape policy conversations, and sustain international attention on Bangladesh's governance trajectory, which is desperately needed in this current time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chaudhary, for your time. And I would like to also thank Dr. Jamil and Barrister Ball for both of your time. Your passion, your time, and your dedication matter to the people of Bangladesh, to those who don't have the courage or the bravery to speak up. So thank you. Thank you. Now I would like to say something to everyone watching in Dhaka, in Chittagong, in London, in New York, and in Riyadh. And I would like to say it very simply. What Bangladesh is experiencing today is not new. Politics is controversial. There will be controversy in politics. There will be crisis. But at the same time, we have to accept, we have to acknowledge that there is a crisis. Governments in Bangladesh have previously used institutional failure as political cover. But what we are seeing today, the scale is really alarming. The deliberateness of this government to let the people sit in the dark, to let the farmers' crop go in vain when the Prime Minister is busy playing with a toy. Bangladesh's energy crisis is not a technical failure. It is a choice. And the people who made that choice did not have to sit in the dark. They did not have to lose their crops. It is the ordinary Bangladeshi people who did. The Awami League built an infrastructure that these people are now weaponizing as political ammunition. That infrastructure was built with the money and the labor of ordinary Bangladeshis. And that infrastructure need to be protected. So we, from the persecution report, are going to keep saying these names. We are going to keep citing these numbers. We are going to keep telling the stories of the ordinary Bangladeshi people, because the darkness that the Yunus, Chamat, or BNP have imposed is temporary, but the record that we are building is not. Thank you everyone for joining us. Joy Bangla. I'm Anwar Shadat Jihan, signing off.